Hey everyone, let's have a conversation about SSDs. These are basically the modern way we store data, but there's some mystery out there and some misconceptions. So let's just have a short conversation about some of the technologies. And at the end of this video, I'm going to show you a way to build your own USB portable SSD that's twice as fast as the commercially available models at the same price. So hey everyone, my name is Doug. I run a video production company in Orem, Utah called DJP. We do events of all sorts that are live, so concerts, sporting events, conferences, those kinds of things. And we do an awful lot with media, so hard drives, SSDs, you name it. And one trend I've seen over the last few years is a lot more people are starting to use SSDs instead of external hard drives to store data, especially for video editing, because an external SSD can actually be fast enough to do video editing. But there's a bunch of different technologies that are out there. So let's just kind of walk back through the history a little bit and explain the different technologies and why some are faster and better than others. So taking a look at a couple of SSDs here. So this one here on the left this is a Samsung 850 Pro. This was state of the art just a handful of years ago, 3-4 years ago. And this uses an interface that's called serial ATA. So if we take a look at that, so that little connector there, my index finger, that is serial ATA. And for a long time, that's pretty much all we had available for mainstream SSDs. And serial ATA was actually designed for hard drives, magnetic hard drives, and it came out in the early 2000s. It took the place of some older technologies that were considerably slower. And serial ATA is really designed for use with magnetic hard drives. The fact that it works with SSDs is mostly because SSDs were starting to come out as a potential replacement for hard drives. However, serial ATA was not really ideal for an SSD. Serial ATA, there's been 3 different versions of it. The first version, serial ATA 1, maxes out at about 150 megabytes per second, and then serial ATA 2 maxes out at about 300 megabytes per second, and then serial ATA 3 maxes out at about 600 megabytes per second. In addition to that, they can only really execute so many commands, so many requests at a time, within a given period of time. And so, that was all designed around hard drives, and SSDs came along, and we're using an old interface in order to do new things. Very, very quickly, SSDs actually outpaced the serial ATA interface that people were using. And there's been a couple of interim other formats that have been used, but realistically, most everybody has settled on an interface that's called NVMe, which is Non-Volatile Memory Express. It's based on a technology that's called PCI Express, which is really the native language that your CPU and your computer uses to talk with peripherals. And it's much, much, much faster than serial ATA. And so the NVMe drives, this is actually an NVMe drive. This is actually a budget model, and yet it still performs about 5 times faster than this serial ATA drive. And this also twice the capacity in this particular case as well. So these NVMe drives are just way, way, way faster, and they take up less space, they consume less power. And when you're designing a laptop, it's really nice to have all that extra space. There are a lot of laptops out there that actually support 2 NVMe drives. Now, in terms of adoption, high-end laptops have been running NVMe for the last probably 3-ish years, thereabouts, somewhere in there. And over time, we've seen that adoption move downrange. And so if you get a mid-range laptop today and it has an SSD, there's a good chance it'll be NVMe. And even some of the budget models that are out there. I just purchased an HP laptop at Best Buy the other day for $219. It actually has an NVMe SSD in it. So they're becoming a lot more common. But a lot of people are not aware of the technology because it's internal. Most people don't take their computers apart, and so they're not aware of what's actually going on inside. Most people are still mostly aware of the older serial ATA SSDs. Now, in terms of portable drives, we've seen a number of manufacturers jump on the opportunity to create portable SSDs. So this is a pretty popular one. This is the Samsung T5. They've since come out with a T7, but the T5 has been very popular. They had a T3 before that, and here's one from SanDisk. This is the SanDisk Extreme Portable SSD. They have an Extreme Pro, which is faster now, but these are also pretty popular. You see these used quite heavily in the video industry, especially with some of the newer cameras that actually have USB interfaces for recording footage. So basically what that allows you to do is record the footage directly onto the same drive that you're going to be editing with, so you don't have to go through that time to transfer from a memory card onto a drive in your computer before you can start editing. You can actually start editing right away. The Samsung T5 and the SanDisk Extreme Portable SSD, they're based on USB 3.1, also known as USB 3.2 Gen 1, and that interface maxes out at about 500 megabytes per second. Now, because those drives actually max out at about 500 megabytes a second, the older serial ATA drives tend to work reasonably well on USB. And while the T5 and the SanDisk drives that I just showed you don't use a serial ATA, there are an awful lot of SSDs out there, portable SSDs, that do use the serial ATA interface. And so they're really performance limited. You're not going to get super fast speeds out of those. Now, the T5 and the SanDisk, they internally are using other interfaces. I haven't pulled one apart to know exactly what it is, but I suspect it's probably based on NVMe. Just across the board, NVMe is just way, way, way faster. But the problem with a lot of these portable drives is they're using an older version of USB than most modern laptops, at least mid-range and high-end laptops, actually support. So a laptop I've got sitting in front of me, and the current MacBook Pros, and a lot of other ones, especially the high-end, will support USB 3.2 Generation 2, which is twice as fast, which maxes out at about a gigabyte per second. And so that's where the Samsung T7 and the SanDisk Extreme Pro drives actually come into play. They're able to use that faster USB interface in order to give you more performance. The downside, of course, to that is they're considerably more money. Now, we can actually take advantage of the fact that some of those drives, like the T5 and the SanDisk Extreme Portable, are using an older version of USB 3.1 Generation 1 or USB 3.2 Generation 1, same thing. There's a faster interface, faster version of USB out there. Even though those drives don't take advantage of it, there are ways of taking advantage of that extra speed. So I have assembled a portable USB drive. Now here I have an external USB drive that I put together with parts that I purchased from Amazon. It's basically just a USB enclosure with an NVMe drive inside. And it uses the newest version of USB, and so we're able to get some really high speeds out of this one. This drive actually does over a gigabyte per second in terms of transfer speed, and it has a very high number of operations per second as well. This particular enclosure also includes cables for both USB-C and USB-A, so you can plug it into either type of port depending on what kind of computer you have. And you get tremendous performance out of these things. Let me actually show you some of the benchmarks that I've run here. All right, so let's start with some of the benchmarks for like a Samsung T5. I don't personally own one of these, so I had to pull this off the internet. But we're seeing transfer rates here for reading about 550 megabytes per second, and for writing about 516 megabytes per second. That's pretty fast, but we can do better. Now, here are the numbers for the drive that I just showed you. Over 1 gigabyte per second on reads, just under a gigabyte per second on writes, and these other numbers are pretty good too. This test here, the third test here, is not directly comparable. It's done differently between these two versions of this tool that I'm using, so ignore that one, but the other numbers are all considerably higher, in most cases more than double. And yet this drive that I built actually costs the same as a Samsung T5. Now, just for a point of reference, let me show you some of the speeds from other types of drives here. So this window here actually shows the performance of the SSD that I have in my laptop. I upgraded the SSD in this laptop a while ago. I just purchased a new NVMe drive. In this case, it's a Samsung 870 EVO. And I'm getting over 3 gigabytes per second on reads and 2.5 gigabytes per second on writes. Really, really fast. Now, in terms of working with video, super high read and write speeds like that make it really easy to move your footage around. It's not uncommon when I'm out on a shoot to have a terabyte of footage in one day. And if I'm having to copy those files at 100 megabytes per second or even 200 megabytes per second, it's going to take a really long time. But if I'm able to copy gigabytes per second, or get at least a gigabyte per second, the amount of time that I spend transferring footage actually goes way, way, way down. So it saves a lot of time, which, who doesn't want to do that? Now, for point of comparison, I'll actually show you a couple others here. Down here on the lower left, this is a USB 3.0 SSD that internally uses a serial ATA 2 interface. So it's limited to about 300 megabytes per second, and you can see that in the numbers. The read speed is just a little under 300. And then over just to the right of that, we have another external USB drive that's based on serial ATA 3, and it's getting some better speeds, but it's about 450 megabytes per second on reads and about 440 on writes. But still, those don't compare to the drive that I put together myself. All right, so how do we do this? All right, so Amazon, point of comparison here. So this is the Samsung T5. This is the 1 terabyte version of it, currently selling for $160. That's actually a pretty decent price for that drive. All right, take a look. The Samsung T7. This is the newer, faster, that actually uses the newer version of USB. It says USB 3.2. It's actually USB 3.2 Generation 2. So this drive is about $230. Now, if we want to assemble our own, take a look. Here's the enclosure that I showed you. That includes the enclosure and then 2 USB cables, one for USB-A, one for USB-C. That's currently $26. And then you can basically pick whatever NVMe drive you want. So here's kind of a high performance but relatively budget model. This is a 1 terabyte from Sabrent, currently $150. So $150 plus the $26 for the enclosure, and you're at about $176. So it's a couple dollars more than the Samsung T5, but it's twice as fast. Now, come over here to the Samsung 970 EVO. This is a really fast SSD. I wouldn't call this a like top of the line, but it's actually a really good one. The performance on this one is very, very good. And that drive is currently $169. Add the $26 enclosure, you're well under $200 for a drive that performs much faster than your Samsung T5. And it's actually smaller and lighter weight. There are also some budget options as well. So like here we have a Sabrent Rocket 1 terabyte NVMe drive for $120. Add the $26 enclosure, and you're actually cheaper than the T5, and performance that's still way better. There's a lot of ways to assemble whatever you want. You don't have to go with super high-end SSDs, because the limiting factor is on the performance is actually the USB interface and not so much the drive itself. So if you want to save a few bucks and get a little bit cheaper drive, then you can certainly do that. I chose to go kind of mid-range when I built mine, sort of a midway point between performance and price, and I've been pretty happy with it. It's worked great. I've used it on a number of shoots to transfer footage from cards. It's great to be able to transfer multiple cards at once and not have to worry about your destination media slowing down like magnetic hard drives do when you start to write from multiple sources like that. So I've been really super happy with it, and I think if you're looking for this sort of thing, that assembling your own is actually a great way to go. It's super easy to do. I can actually show you on a different enclosure here what that looks like. So this is a different enclosure, but the same idea as the one that I showed you. So basically remove the top cover, take the SSD, pop it in there, then there's a screw you screw down right there. Add your thermal pad, and then put your top cover back on. And that's it. And you plug in your USB and you're done. So ultra simple. Anybody can do it. You don't have to know anything about technology. You just plug it in and you're good to go. So anyway, if you guys have questions about any of this, please leave those down in the comments below. I'll try my best to try and answer those. And the community, if you want to participate in answering those questions, certainly feel free to jump in too. Sometimes it might take me a little while, and there's occasions when I don't actually see questions and I miss them, so I apologize for that. But if people in the community want to jump in there and help answer those questions too, that would be fantastic. So if you guys are new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I try to do content related to video production in general about once a week. I've had a pretty busy 2020, so I haven't been getting videos out as often as I want, but I'm trying to do better. I'm really trying to do better. But please do consider subscribing. If you have ideas for content that you want to see, please let me know. You can either leave a comment down below or reach out through my website. You can get to the site through djp.li/contact. Also, if you are in the video production market, I have a website that I've created called crewaccess.com. Be sure and use the link in the comments, in the description down below. You can get some promotional plans that are not available otherwise. The site helps you to communicate with your crew, keep track of your equipment, keep track of your events, schedule everything about everything. Helps keep track of the finances. It does a ton of different things. And just to kind of let you guys on the YouTube channel here know, I'm going to be doing a price increase on the site on the 1st of April. So if you're considering signing up, you might want to do it before then to lock in your price. Like once you sign up for a plan, I guarantee that that plan that you're on, your subscription will never go up in price. So if you are considering signing up, you might want to do that before April 1st when the rates go up, some of them substantially. So anyway, please take a look at the site. We appreciate it. And again, if you have questions, let me know. Thanks for watching and have a great day.